So tonight's talk by Dr. Alev Berberoğlu. So a little introduction to Alev. Alev Berberoğlu is an art historian with a focus on the late 19th century Ottoman visual culture. She obtained her doctorate from the Department of Archaeology and History of Art at Koç University with her dissertation about Elisa Zonaro. So we will learn a lot more from that research. During her doctoral years, she studied at the University of Bologna within the Erasmus Plus program and conducted research in Paris in affiliation with the Center for Turkish, Ottoman, Balkan and Central Asian Studies. And that was as a recipient of a French Embassy Research Fellowship. Before her PhD, she received her MA in Arts Management from Yeditepe University and completed a BA with a double major in English Language and Literature and in Latin Language and Literature at Istanbul University. In 2023, Alev joined the Department Michalski at the Biblioteca Hertziana Max Planck Institute for Art History in Rome as a postdoctoral fellow and is working on her research project, The Image of Naples in Sultan Abdul Hamid II's photography collection. So I am now going to stop sharing and I'm going to pass the screen to Alev.
Thank you so much, Quentin, for this very kind introduction. And also I would like to thank the Levantine Heritage Foundation for their very kind invitation to share my research with this esteemed audience today. And I'm very thankful also to Craig for his support and making sure that everything runs smoothly. And as the usual procedure goes, okay, here I share my screen. Okay, it's visible, right? Everything works. Okay, thank you. In this presentation, I will introduce the Italian photographer Elisa Zonaro to you and discuss various facets of her professional career in Istanbul during the late Ottoman period, which coincided with the last 2 decades of Sultan Abdülhamid II's reign. Having written and spoken about the photographer on various occasions, this time I will approach the topic by focusing on the argument that the camera served as a means of female empowerment for Elisa Zonaro in the Ottoman context to exert her agency and express her artistic vision through the medium of photography. Furthermore, by assuming an active role as the user of the camera, she reversed the role of the objectifying male gaze, for this time there was a woman behind the camera who determined the narrative. Owing to her creative and experimentative production, as well as brave personality, she left her mark on the late Ottoman visual culture in diverse ways, which I will delve into shortly. These facts we can now pronounce with certainty, however, were unknown until very recently. Before I completed my dissertation entitled Unwritten Histories of Photography, Elisa Zonaro, an Italian photographer in Ottoman Istanbul at Koç University 2 years ago, she had been seen merely as the wife, assistant, and muse of Fausto Zonaro, Abdülhamid II's famous court painter. Her significance for the history of photography in the Ottoman Empire was not yet understood, and her studio was entirely forgotten. One might hypothesize that the scholarship's intensive involvement with the Sultan's painter caused her to remain in the background, and gradually the traces of her achievements receded to the footnotes and dusty folders in the archives. In other words, even today, these patriarchal biases of historiography continue to push creative women to the margins and doom their names to oblivion. Nevertheless, reading the books and exhibition catalogs about Fausto Zonaro led me to suspect that there could have been more to Elisa's story than the scholarship of Ottoman photo history used to tell us. especially when Fausto Zonaro's autobiography was translated and published post-mortem in 2008 in Turkish and 3 years later in English. A significant amount of the street photographs and portraits that Elisa Zonaro took were included during the editing process to visually enrich her husband's memoirs. Some of the examples are here. You can see on the right side of the screen. Since these captions under the photographs indicated the presence of a family archive in Florence, Italy, I thought any research aiming to shed light on Elisa Zonaro's photography surely had to begin there. This initial examination was further supplemented with numerous research trips in libraries, collection and archives in Turkey, Italy, and France throughout my doctoral journey, which helped me uncover various dimensions of Elisa Zonaro's photography. So, I have structured today's presentation in 4 sections, focusing on Elisa Zonaro's early life and education, her photography studio in Istanbul, her street photography, and then her artistic collaborations with her husband, the court painter Fausto Zonaro. So at the end of my paper, I will be looking forward to hearing your comments and questions. So let me begin. Elisabetta Carlotta Pante was born on the 13th of September 1863 in Santo Stefano del Comelico, today Santo Stefano di Cadore in Belluno in northern Italy. To her parents, Luisa or Elisabetta Jarosz and Antonio Pante, who was an engineer. With the support of her family, Elisa and her 4 siblings received proper education. She obtained her certificate in 1882, which allowed her to work as a teacher in Italian primary schools. As the researcher Daniel Florino has emphasized in an essay, considering the low school attendance rate of girls in the late 19th century in Italy, the education that Elisa Pante received was not negligible at all. In 1886, Elisa Pante moved to Venice with her sisters because she wanted to continue her studies in fine arts. The event that completely changed Elisa Pante's life in Italy was her meeting with the artist Fausto Zonaro in around 1888. At that time, Elisa began to attend his painting classes at the Palazzo Pesaro in Venice, which you see on the right. And soon a relationship blossomed between the two. At the same time, it must also be underlined that these painting classes she took years before she began to study photography not only improved Elisa's compositional and artistic skills, but also prepared her to approach photography with a pictorial perspective. Therefore, this fine arts training in Venice would have an impact later both on her portraits and street photography in Istanbul. While Fausto Zonaro was living in Venice, he was a talented but economically struggling artist considering new opportunities abroad. And for this reason, he was thinking about moving to Egypt or Istanbul or perhaps Naples. Finally, the young couple decided on Istanbul because of the captivating descriptions of the city by such authors as Théophile Gautier, Edmondo de Amicis, and Pierre Loti. Years later, while writing his memoirs, Fausto Zonaro would express his gratitude for Elisa in the following words. I found the strength, I'm quoting from him, his memoirs, I found the strength to live in this city thanks to you, my beloved wife. Had you not come here first, had you not scouted around, had you not encouraged me, then perhaps Constantinople and its enchanting colors of which I had read in Edmondo de Amicis' book would have remained just a dream. Elisa Pante was a lively young woman of 28 years with dreams and ambitions when she left her country to start a new life in the capital of the Ottoman Empire, which seems like a major leap of faith. For, as a researcher Arianna Borga points out, quote, Even though the recent mechanization of transport made it easier for women to travel long distances and the routes to the Middle East were less fraught with danger and difficulties, it was still unusual for a woman to undertake such a voyage alone. Unquote. In September 1891, 2 months before Fausto Zonaro, she came to Istanbul on her own, rented a room at the top of Yüksek Kaldırım, found herself work as a teacher of painting and of Italian. Fausto joined her in November, and they soon got married at the church of Saint Esprit. After their room at Yüksek Kaldırım, the Zonaro couple rented a new house in the Ayasbaşı neighborhood of Taksim. When they moved into this house, their first child, Faustino, was born. Later, the couple had 4 more children, Faustino, Yolanda, Mafalda, and Maria, who unfortunately died at an early age. To earn their living, Fausto Zonaro made paintings and sold his pictures, gave painting lessons, while Elisa Zonaro continued to give private lessons. Her husband's book of memoirs provides information about the couple's career plans in 1893 and how Elisa Zonaro's studies in photography began. Fausto Zonaro writes, quote, I would go to Padua, where all my scattered belongings had been assembled, and take part in the competition at the Brera Triennale. I would also exhibit all my paintings. If work did not go as I wished, I would return to Istanbul, where we had lived securely. As for my wife, she would go to Paris for a private photography course. We were thinking that, on our return, we might open a small photography studio in the capital city of the Turks. By the end of August 1893, I was in Padua and my wife and son were in Paris. Unquote. For about 11 months from August 1893 to July 1894, Elisa Zonaro lived in Paris and learned the particularities of the profession at the studio of Eugène Pirou, one of the most accomplished and awarded portrait photographers in Paris, at the address Boulevard Saint-Germain, number 5. The photograph you see here shows Elisa Zonaro, and it was taken at the studio of Eugène Pirou. And as you can see on the slide, he won 10 medals, like gold medals, and 2 honorary diplomas, etc. So he was quite a successful photographer. His advertisements frequently appeared in French newspapers, magazines, and commercial yearbooks. For example, the one we see now, Eugène Pirou is listed among the best photographers of Paris, including, for example, Nadar and other very important names of the day. Here you see a selection of advertisements about Pirou on the magazines. And for example, the one on the right side explains that his was the best photography establishment in Paris, and that he was a photographer of celebrities, important people, ministers, and that other advertisements show us that he also took artistic photographs. Moreover, the depictions of Pirou's studio in Saint-Germain, which you see on this slide, reveal that it was a spacious and well-organized place, and it had a stately presence on the boulevard, attracting the attention of the passers-by. Rather than being an ordinary Parisian photography studio, Pirou's building seemed like an established art gallery or even a museum, distinctively branded with its owner's name. And it was here that Elisa Zonaro gained practice in various photographic processes such as gelatin, silver bromide, platinum printing, cyanotype, snapshot photography, and photo printing techniques on fabric. Hence, I argue that Elisa Zonaro's decision to study photography in Paris with such an accomplished studio photographer as Pirou alone demonstrates her intent to build a professional career in photography. Otherwise, she would not have taken the trouble to change her settled life in Istanbul and go to France with her 1-year-old baby, adding further responsibility on her shoulders. Therefore, her training with Peru affirms that she had professional ambitions and plans, while it refutes the widespread claims in the scholarship that Elisa Zonaro learned photography only to help her husband's paintings. Here, I would like to mention an exceptional discovery I made during my research in Paris. While examining the exhibition catalogs of the years when Elisa Zonaro lived in France, I noticed that in 1894, Fausto Zonaro participated in the exhibition Salon des Artistes Français at Palais des Champs-Élysées with his painting entitled Trovatore. His address in Paris was indicated in the catalogue as à Paris chez Madame Elisa Jaroche, Rue Nollet, 104. Madame Elisa Jaroche was actually Elisa Zonaro's mother, which shows that probably it was Mrs. Jaroche who came to Paris before her daughter and rented an apartment to help her. In other words, it is owing to the solidarity among women between mother and daughter that opened the way to photography for Elisa Zonaro. When she needed a room of her own, with a respectful nod to Virginia Woolf here, her mother was there to support her. Furthermore, it appears that it was not only her daughter that she helped, but also her son-in-law, Fausto Zonaro. When Elisa Zonaro returned to Istanbul in the summer of 1894, she established her own photography studio in Taksim, in the building where she lived with her family. In his memoirs, Fausto Zonaro described their house in the following words, quote, Ömer Efendi was the owner of a beautiful wooden house with a small garden between the huge graveyard and the German embassy on Cemetery Street in the Ayazpaşa neighborhood of Taksim. I had a wander around his house and could have been built just for me. It was spacious, drew in light from above, and had lots of rooms, unquote. The fact that the house drew in light from above is very important because in the 19th century, photography studios needed natural light in order to operate. On this slide, you see several examples of how the studios were architecturally designed to allow daylight inside, and the studio photographers adjusted the intensity of the light by using curtains. But let me now slightly go back and explain to you how I discovered the fact that Elisa Zonaro opened her photography studio. In 2019, I was fortunate enough to meet with the heirs of the Zonaro family and visit the family archive for my doctoral research to examine Elisa Zonaro's extant works and any relevant documentation that existed. Studying in the photographer's family archive opened new possibilities to analyze the photographs, going beyond their visual qualities and to examine their materiality. It is particularly important to underline that this manner of approaching photographs owes much to the studies of scholars such as Geoffrey Batchen, Elizabeth Edwards, and Janice Hart. For example, Edwards discusses the interconnectedness of material culture and photography as follows, quote, the fact that photographs are not simply images, but also things that people use in their everyday lives, collect in museums, or display in galleries is often overlooked. However, the physical nature of photographs has been central to their understanding and social functions since the advent of the medium, unquote. So following this line of thought, while the photographs published in Fausto Zonaro's autobiography reproduced only the image content and ignored their physical presence as objects, looking at these pictures, measuring them, examining the material traces led to exceptional findings. Although none of the photographs had on its back Elisa Zonaro's name or signature, one portrait photograph of her firstborn son, Faustone, had the stamp marking Atelier Elisa, Constantinople, which you see on the left. Moreover, the name Elsa appeared again on a hand-colored photograph of a flower arrangement printed on silk. The heirs of the Zonaro family couldn't provide any details which would clarify if there was a link between Atelier Elsa and Elisa Zonaro. But researching the name Elsa has revealed that it is used as an abbreviation for the names Elisabetta and Elisa. Searching for Atölye Elisa Constantinople in the digital archives, libraries, and online databases yielded only 2 results. Yet, they provided substantial clues regarding the studio's location, field of expertise, and clientele. The first photograph found in the Tahatoros archive in Istanbul is a portrait of an upper-class Turkish Muslim woman called Leman Hanım. Apart from the studio's marking, the back of the photograph also bears handwritten notes in Ottoman Turkish that the researcher Tahatoros added, which clarified her identity. Dressed in fashionable European attire and unveiled, Leman Hanım's portrait diverges significantly from the stereotypical representations of Turkish Muslim women in the 19th century Orientalist photography. It can be surmised from her portrait that Atölye Elsa was a safe space for her, in which she felt at ease before the photographer so that she could reveal her hair and face and determine her self-representation for the camera. In the late 19th century, posing with this liberty would not have been possible if the Ottoman Muslim woman had been in the studio of a male photographer. The second photograph, with Atölye Elsa''s stamp marking, is in the Pierre de Gigot collection of photographs of the Ottoman Empire and the Republic of Turkey at the Getty Research Institute. While the recto of this very rare photograph shows Cemalettin Afghani, whom Encyclopedia Iranica describes as an outstanding ideologist and political activist of the late 19th century Muslim world, the verso expands our knowledge on Atölye Elsa significantly. It highlights the expertise of the studio, that is, photographing women and children, and it also mentions that the studio provides photography services at the client's home. Even though these aspects do not help identify a link between Atölye Elsa and Elisa Zonaro, they do strengthen the likelihood of the photographers being a woman. Lastly, and most importantly, the back of Cemalettin Afghani's photograph reveals the exact location of Atölye Elsa, 29 Taksim Rue Mezarlık. It is known that in 1898, the Zonaro family moved to a large villa gifted by Sultan Abdülhamit II in the Akaretler district of Istanbul. However, their exact address prior to this was not known. One major primary source to look for information about the addresses of artists as well as other professionals in the 19th century Istanbul is the commercial yearbooks called Annuaire Orientale du Commerce. Since Elisa Zonaro returned from Paris to Istanbul in 1894 and Cemalettin Afghani died in 1897, the commercial yearbooks published between these years needed to be consulted. Yet, as the 1894 yearbook demonstrates, Fausto Zonaro's address is given only as Taksim. What finally resolved this mystery was finding an announcement in the Ottoman bulletin in French called Le Moniteur Oriental in the early 1890s, which was an invitation to Fausto Zonaro's exhibition opening in his studio at Ayazpaşa, Rue Mezarlık, number 29, Pera. This information confirms the link between Elisa Zonaro and Atölye Elsa, verifying her as the founder of the photography studio and placing her among the professional photographers of Istanbul. It also shows that Elisa and Fausto Zonaro's home environment not only provided them with a domestic space for living, but also a professional space for art, creativity, and business. So this map on this slide shows the exact location of the house where the Zonaro family lived and where Elisa Zonaro founded her photography studio, Atölye Elsa. If we remember the quotation a few slides ago from Fausto Zonaro, he described the place, the location of their apartment, their house, saying that it was Cemetery Street, and Mezarlık in English is cemetery. So you see, I don't know if you can see the arrow, but this is Rue Mezarlık bis. So the house was here, and here you see it is the Taksim Square. I would also like to draw your attention to the ways in which Elisa Zonaro advertised her photographic services. The back of the photograph of Cemalettin Afghani presents two pieces of information that distinguish the studio's position among other studios in Istanbul and turn the photographer's gender into an advantage. Spécialité pour dames et enfants, and photography à domicile. In other words, being a woman, Elisa Zonaro could visit women, both Muslim and non-Muslim, inside their houses and take their photographs. Then each photograph she took and pasted onto her customized cardboard would function like a practical form of advertisement when the owner of the portrait shared it with her close circle of family or friends. Likewise, her specialty in photographic subjects was emphasized as women and children, both of whom spend most of their time indoors within the confines of their domestic space, assuming that her clientele would consist of non-working affluent women. In the case of Muslim households, the presence of male photographers would have been unimaginable. Therefore, as seen, Elisa Zonaro used these sociocultural conditions to her advantage. Examining several advertisements of other photography studios published in the Annuaire Orientale in the 1890s would make evident the contrast in terms of gender and photographic access. For example, the Swedish photographer Guillaume Berggren highlighted in his 1891 advertisement in Annuaire Orientale panoramas and views of Istanbul, the Bosphorus, and Bursa as his specialties. In the 1893-94 edition of the same annual, Nicolas Andromenos stated that he was a specialist for group photographs, whereas Iranian emphasized his skills in photographing views and monuments of Istanbul. The well-known court photographers Abdullah Frer highlighted in their 1896 advertisement the fact that they were the only ones authorized to sell photographs from the Selamlık ceremony of the Sultan, as well as the interiors of the imperial palaces. As these advertisements indicate, the growing interest in photography led to an increase in the number of photography studios in Istanbul during the late 19th century. Therefore, in order to stand out, photographers aimed to draw their potential customers' attention to their specialties in their advertisements. However, the commercial photographers who were active in the Ottoman capital in this period and circulated their advertisements in the local press were all men. Hence, unlike Atelier Elsa run by a woman photographer, these men could not openly state photographing women as their specialty in their advertisements, perhaps adhering to the unwritten rules of decency due to the problematic relationship between religion and photographing Muslim women, as this caricature implies. Elisa Zonaro's practice also attracted Sultan Abdülhamit II's attention, who had great interest in photography and gathered an impressive collection in his Yıldız Palace. An article written by Mahmud Sadık about Fausto Zonaro's artworks, which appeared in the popular illustrated magazine Servet-i Fünun in 1898, made a praising reference to Elisa Zonaro's photography. The Sultan, who always followed the press very attentively, noticed this article and wanted to see some of her photographs. Fausto Zonaro describes this exciting moment in his memoirs as follows. The gentlemanly representation of my wife's virtues in the Turkish critic's article did not escape the attention of His Majesty the Sultan, and he wanted to give an example of the courtesy of Oriental magnanimity. She was informed that His Majesty would like to see one of her photographic pieces, but no other subject apart from flowers was specified. Taking two photographs of two groups of flowers, my wife printed them on silk and prepared two cushions for His Majesty's harem. She was awarded second class of the Order of Charity. So this was one of those photographs. And I'm continuing with the quotation. where Fausto Zonaro describes this award from the Sultan. It was decorated with diamonds. It was a medal with a high value, and in this way, my wife was brought up to the same level as the wives of the European ambassadors, unquote. Furthermore, in 1909, the Sultan also awarded Elisa Zonaro the Medal of Fine Arts, and hence it is clear that Elisa's photographic works were admired and esteemed by the palace. So on this slide, you see Elisa Zonaro with her two medals, one award, one medal. Comparing how Fausto Zonaro and Elisa Zonaro posed to the camera with their Ottoman awards reveals that there was a gendered sartorial division between men and women. Of official clothes on which they display their achievements, women did not receive a similar kind of dress. What we observe here in the case of Elisa Zonaro is quite interesting because in the photograph she's wearing a jacket with floral designs painted by her husband, where she attached her awards. This might be an indication of her desire to come up with a special costume to celebrate the occasion in the absence of an official uniform for women in Ottoman bureaucracy. I interpret her subtle gesture as a form of maybe a resistance, a kind of resistance, and assertion of identity on the part of the woman photographer. Before I move on to her street photography, I would like to show you some of the portrait photographs Elisa Zonaro took in her studio, which do not have the marking Atelier Elsa Constantinople. This may be due to the fact that in January 1898, the Zonaro family moved to their Akaretler villa, which was granted to Fausto Zonaro when he became the court painter to Abdülhamit II. Although it seems that she did not use this studio name anymore, her works in the genre of portrait photography continued. Her studio portraits clearly demonstrate her professionalism and photographic skills. To prepare her studio for portrait photography, Elisa Zonaro chose and prepared both the backdrops and the props, including the chairs, tables, and various objects, in accordance with the fashions of the time. For every portrait shooting, she adjusted the light and organized all the objects that would be seen behind and next to the person whose photograph she would take, while she also arranged the sitters' stands and pose. The cameras which Elisa Zonaro used in her studio have not survived to our day, but the remaining glass negatives provide some information. So she used at least 3 different cameras for portrait photography. She used glass negatives of Lumière Cephile, Ferragna, and Capelli. These are the brands that she used. And for taking snapshots outside the studio, she generally used 9 centimeter per 12 centimeter glass negatives. In addition to portraits, Elisa Zonaro was also very much engaged in street photography, and this genre constituted an important component of her practice. These photographs, which have been preserved in her family archive, depict scenes from the daily life in Istanbul in the late 1890s. The images in which the influence of travel literature on Istanbul is felt strongly show that Elisa wandered through the streets of Istanbul for hours in search of impressive shots. In her street photographs, rather than the prominent features of the city, such as its historical monuments and squares, Elisa Zonaro's interest was focused on the ways in which the Ottomans and city residents experienced these places. In a sense, she aimed to see and understand the city through the eyes of those who lived there, and used her camera as a tool for this purpose. In her street photography, she took cinematic pictures that communicated an intense effect of spontaneity to convey her feelings while observing the city and its people. Elisa Zonaro's regular strolls around the districts of Istanbul in the 1890s to observe and photograph lively instances from the quotidian life of the city dwellers recall the figure of the flaneur described by Charles Baudelaire in his influential 1863 essay entitled The Painter of Modern Life. I will now read a quotation from this text while showing more examples of Elisa Zonaro's street photography, for I think that conceptually they align very closely with each other. So, Baudelaire describes his artistic urban wanderer as follows, quote, "The crowd is his domain, as the air is that of the birds, and the water the fishes. His passion and profession is to espouse the crowd. For the perfect flaneur, for the passionate observer, it is an immense joy to take up one's dwelling among the multitude, amidst undulation, movement, the fugitive, the infinite. To be absent from home, yet feel oneself everywhere at home. To view the world, to be at the heart of the world, and yet hidden from the world. Such are some of the least pleasures of those independent spirits, passionate and impartial, that language can only inadequately define. The spectator is a prince who rejoices everywhere in his incognito." Unquote. Therefore, I argue that having trained in France, not only Baudelaire's essay and intellectual ideas, but also 19th century French street photographers such as Charles Marville, Eugène Auger might have had a significant impact in Elisa Zonaro's photographic approach to Istanbul. Therefore, I interpret her urban wanderings with her camera as acts of flânerie. It is also possible to approach Elisa and Fausto Zonaro as an artistic duo who worked together. From their painting lessons at the Palazzo Pesaro in Venice to their life together in Istanbul, their creative dialogue evolved into a common artistic language over the years. They often worked on the same themes, one in photography and the other in painting. It is possible to observe the reflections of this collaboration in many of their works. From time to time, they also pose as models for each other. As you see on the left, there is Fausto Zonaro holding his daughter, and he's dressed as a dervish, posing to Elisa Zonaro's camera. And on the right next to this photograph, we see Elisa Zonaro, this time posing for a picture that a painting that Fausto Zonaro is working on. And on the right, we see Fausto painting one of his famous paintings. Nevertheless, despite having worked on various projects side by side, Elisa Zonaro's role went unnoticed by art historiography. For example, according to the inside cover of Adolphe Talasso's 1908 book, Der Saadet, Istanbul, Porte du Bonheur, it was Fausto Zonaro who made the illustrations for the stories. However, when we compare these pictures with the photographs in the family archive, it is easily seen that sometimes there was an exact transfer from a photograph to the picture, and other times elements taken from several photographs were brought together in a new pictorial composition. Therefore, the illustrations made for Talasso's book were born out of the combined effort and creativity of the two artists. It is possible to observe a similar kind of collaboration in a more comprehensive manner in Fausto Zonaro's painting Ertuğrul Cavalry Regiment. Both the photographs in the Family Archive and the explanations of Elisa Zonaro, which were published in Servet-i Fünun, indicate that for several weeks they worked together on the Galata Bridge for this painting. The subject was the same for both. While Fausto Zonaro was making quick sketches, Elisa Zonaro was taking photographs from different angles. Consequently, when the painter returned to his studio and stood before the canvas, Elisa's gaze, as well as his own sketches, had an effective role in the final composition. In addition to working with portraits and street photography, Elisa Zonaro also reproduced her husband's paintings using her camera. Essentially, her aim was to promote Fausto Zonaro's art so that he could receive further commissions and expand his audience, but they also contributed to the democratization and dissemination of artworks, since buying a photographic reproduction was much more economical compared to an oil on canvas painting by Fausto Zonaro. These reproductions were either sold individually or they were compiled in albums and given to distinguished people as gifts, or they might also have been sold as well. Thanks to Elisa Zonaro's photographic reproductions, the circulation of Fausto Zonaro's paintings in the international press contributed to the painter's fame and success. You see some examples from the Ottoman Empire, from the US, from France, from Italy. So his paintings were reached everywhere thanks to Elisa's photographs. I would like to point out that Elisa and Fausto Zonaro enhanced each other's careers, not only artistically, but at the same time socially. As Fausto Zonaro's social circle began to grow significantly, especially after he was appointed as the court painter of Abdülhamit II in 1896, Elisa Zonaro also became a part of the same privileged network. For instance, owing to her painter husband's friendship with Prince Abdülmecit, she too had the opportunity to meet him and take his portrait photograph. Let me draw your attention to the signature here below, where Elisa Zonaro wrote Fotografia Elisa Zonaro, using the Italian word for photography. So she began to, her confidence as a photographer began to grow, we can say this. Very same photograph later on also appeared in Adolf Talasso's article about the patron of arts, the very same Abdülmecit Efendi, Prince Abdülmecit. And there, in the caption, Elisa Zonaro's name is mentioned as the photographer. And very similar to this friendship between Abdülmecit Efendi and Fausto Zonaro, there was another friendship worth mentioning, and it was that of Enver Bey and Fausto Zonaro. He later becomes Pasha, but at the time he was Enver Bey. Elisa Zonaro could photograph him, Enver Bey, with his family, and afterwards Fausto Zonaro used this photograph to paint a picture of Enver Bey. And here we also see on the left top corner the date and also the signature of Elisa Zonaro. Okay. So after the deposition of Sultan Abdülhamit II, the Zonaro family was forced to return to Italy in 1910. Although there are some indications that Elisa Zonaro continued photography while she was living in Sanremo, approximately between 1910 and 1920, except for a few surviving family photographs, it has not been possible to further trace her practice, even in the local archives, including the press archives, etc. Hence, it seems quite reasonable to say that her photography career was based in Istanbul, and it is possible to define her as a photographer of Istanbul. Elisa Zonaro passed away in Florence on June 27th, 1945, and her tomb is in the Cimitero della Porte Sante, which is adjacent to San Miniato al Monte in the same city. So to sum it up, just to conclude, the Italian photographer left behind many images, not only in her family archive in Florence, but also those spread all around the world in in libraries, public and private archives, as well as collections, some of which are already identified, while others are still waiting to be discovered. As a multicultural and multifaceted visual artist ahead of her time, who followed her dreams passionately and bravely from Belluno to Venice, from Paris to Istanbul, Elisa Zonaro's legacy continues to inspire us even today. Thank you. Thanks for listening.
Alev, thank you so much. That was a tremendous account of Elisa Zonaro's life and career. And what a remarkable woman she was. Very independent spirited, I think.
Indeed, right.
In an age where I guess would she have been frowned upon by many for her independence? Can you hear?
Sorry, I couldn't hear the last thing you said. Sorry.
Did people disapprove of her independence?
We don't have any kind of proof to answer this. There is no documentation about this. But I think she firmly believed in herself, so that like after all these years, the photographs were kept, they were conserved. When Elisa moved from Istanbul to back to Italy with her family. First, they went to Rome, then they went to Sanremo and some other cities as well. All the time, she took extremely great care of the photographs. So there wasn't like any kind of a diary or some personal notes that would shed further light on whether she faced any kind of criticism at the time.
Thank you. Now, if anyone would like to comment, ask a question, please indicate by raising your hand, turning the video on, using the Zoom raise hand function. Anybody? So there's a question online from Elif. Let's just have a quick look at that. Are there more photographs of Elisa herself?
Yes, there are. There are not like hundreds of photographs, but there are some photographs. So I had to like choose some of them.
Okay, thank you. I have another question. So to what extent, when Elisa set up her studio, did she start just taking studio pictures, or and then evolve to street photography, or was she doing the street photography at the same time? And I suppose my question is, was the street photography really a commercial enterprise, or was it just more of a hobby?
Thank you so much. It is a tricky question, but I'm happy to say that also her street photography had a commercial dimension, and it was not just a woman with a camera and having this activity as a kind of a pastime. Because there are several indications that in the consulate circles, her photographs were sold, and also there were some artists other than Fausto Zonaro who modeled her photographs to make paintings of their own. So the artists of the time use her photographs as an aid in their depictions. So there was a kind of a commercial aspect to that as well. And she had this very experimental side, and she, continued to produce by trying different techniques, trying different mediums, media. For example, she also printed her photographs on fans that she either gifted or sold to other women. So these are very interesting things. And her production was very varied, let's say. There was a variety in her ways of production.
Okay, thank you. Another question from Elif. Can you just explain why did she leave Istanbul in 1910? And also, what was the date on the corner of the photograph of Enver Bey?
Okay, let me find first Enver Bey's photograph. So the date on the photograph is, let me see, the 13th of May, 1909. This was the date. Why did the Zonaro family have to leave the Ottoman Empire? Because when the Sultan Abdülhamit II, was dethroned, his Fausto Zonaro's involvement with Abdülhamit caused a kind of a tension between the new ruler, between the new Sultan, and the new Sultan and the government asked him to pay for their luxurious Akaretler villa, which up until that time the family enjoyed, free of charge. So financially, the new ruler constrained the family to leave. There was no way of them to stay there and survive. So that's why they turned to Italy.
Oh, thank you. So just to follow up on that, I mean, did Fausto Zonaro also lose his imperial commission as court photographer?
Yes.
So the income went as well. So
Yes, that's right. That's right. So they had to rebuild their life, sort of restart from scratch in Italy.
And in Italy, did Elisa continue with her photography in much the same way?
So when they moved to Sanremo and they had a new sort of a house built, which both of the Zonaros used both as a living space and a working space. And there was like one leaflet that survived from that time, which on the one page advertises Fausto Zonaro's gallery, his paintings of Bosphorus, the Orient, etc. And on the other page, there's a little information about the presence of a photography studio, and that the interested people can come and get photography lessons. But obviously, there's some sort of an indication that Elisa Zonaro continued working as a photographer in Sanremo. But in the family archive, there were only a few family photographs from their time there. And soon after, the World War begins, and also the newspaper archives in Sanremo kind of, some of the issues get lost, and there's not a complete archive that I can follow her trace. This is all I can say.
Okay. Thank you. Now, any other questions from the audience? Do let me know. Otherwise, I have another question. I mean, clearly, the Zonaro family was a very creative, artistic family. I mean, the parents were both artists in their own right, probably both quite strong characters. What influence did that have on the children, and did any of them go down the sort of creative route in their careers?
Yeah, actually, one of the boys took up painting for a while. He even made like counterfeit fake versions of his father's paintings because his name was such a legend. You know, he tried to imitate his style, but without much success. But none of the others, followed their path, let's say.
So, in terms of now, clearly there is a family collection of Zonaro photographs and presumably Zonaro art, Fausto's work as well. And through whom did that sort of come down? Who inherited that? Who collected it? And who looks after it now?
Um, the Zonaro's great great grandson, Cesare Mario Trevigne, who was the editor of some of the Fausto Zonaro books. And he also contributed to the exhibition on Elisa Zonaro that was organized in Istanbul by Kazlıçeşme Art Space. And in that catalog, he also contributed with an article.
And just, I take it, has that exhibition finished now?
No, it's actually extended. I think it'll be open until the end of this month. Yeah, but
So,
we need to check.
so if anyone wants to go and see it, be quick and go
Yeah,
to.
you have 2 weeks.
And is there a publication from that exhibition? So if people want to
Yes.
look at the collection of photographs, they can.
Yes, right. There's a catalog. It is both printed and also online. And if the exhibition space ran out of catalogs, one can always go to the Istiklal Street to the Anamet Research Center, where I left one copy for those who are interested.
Very good. And then are there any other significant collections? Because clearly, her production was quite considerable, and I imagine there must be collections elsewhere.
Yes, that's right. Well, as I mentioned or hypothesized, probably in some attics, some forgotten drawers, some mislabeled folder in an archive, other photographs might come up to light, I would say. This is why I keep talking about like Atelier Elsa and explaining this marking, this name, so that if one were to come across such a photograph at a flea market or a second-hand bookshop, and if the person was curious enough to research it online, then they would find this link between Atelier Elsa and Elisa Zonaro, and hopefully add to this growing literature on her.
Well, that's fascinating. Well, it's something that we collectively should be keeping an eye open for, I think. Yes. So just checking again whether there's anyone wants to chip in with a question. If not, I mean, thank you very much.
There's a question there.
Here we go. Another question from Alev. Yes.
Yes, right.
I'll read it out. Do you know if her photographs were also published and sold as postcards?
Yes, they were published and also sold as postcards. But those are mostly photographic reproductions of Fausto Zonaro's paintings instead of her own photographic works, I would say. And you can see some of these postcards in the Kazlıçeşme exhibition I mentioned, they're curated by Ömer Faruk Şerifoğlu.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I mean, I have no more questions, I think, and the audience can still chip in. But can I just move on? Could you tell us a little bit more about your future work? I mean, two points really. One is, will you continue researching Elisa Zonaro? And the other is, well, what is your next big project?
Thank you. Well, my current huge project is my postdoc project that I'm working on the image of Naples in the collection of Sultan Abdülhamit II. So there are like five albums with photographs from the larger province of Naples, and I'm working on the perceptions of this city, this province in the Ottoman context. So yes.
And how long will this project last? And are there more cities where Abdulhamid II's photographers were operating?
Of course, yes. But the Hamidian collection was not only built through his own photographers, but at the same time, it was built with purchases and gifts as well. So instead of the Sultan's direct commissions, he sometimes received like photo albums directly from Italy and other countries as well. So I began this project almost 1.5 years ago, and it will be completed in 5 or 6 months' time, and then I will move on to other topics within the domain of Ottoman photography history.
Excellent.
Thank
Well,
you.
so just to wrap up, thank you so much for a fascinating
Thank
talk.
you. Thank you.
I think we all have a task to keep our eye open for other Elisa Zonaro photographs, but also on the whole subject of photography in the Ottoman era. I mean, one thing that struck me was almost how mature the photography market was in Istanbul, where you see the different ateliers all specializing in something in order to differentiate themselves from each other.
Yes.
So something I hadn't quite appreciated. But anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you. My pleasure.
We very much look forward to learning more about your work in the future.
Thank you so much. Very kind of you. Thank you.
And thank you everyone for attending, and good night.
Thank you.